Protecting MMORPG players from themselves. What the hell is going on here, Mr. MadSeason? Let's go. What's up?
Whether it be an FPS, a side scroller, an adventure game, an RPG, whatever. Every genre of game shares the trait in that one of their core design pillars is that the player must be protected from themselves.
That is true.
What are games? How do you manipulate ones and zeros in such a way that it grabs and holds the attention of the player?
This is the example that I like to give, and I think it's hilarious. Okay, if there was a tree, imagine this tree. If the player base determined that running in circles around this tree 1,000 times, if you did this 1,000 times, you get a 20% damage buff, a 20% damage world buff, and it lasted 2 hours. You could chrono boon it. It's like a world buff, and it gives you a 20% damage bonus. You know what you would have? You would have every single player on the entire circle running on the entire server running in circles all fucking day. I gotta get my buff. I gotta get my tree buff. I'm getting my tree buff. You would have people doing that. And so the title of the video, like lemmings, 100%. It is true. The game developers need to make sure the meta, whatever the meta is not fucking degenerate, retarded, toxic. The obligation of a game dev is to protect gamers from themselves, because the gamers are what? Chat, gamers are what? One word answer. Gamers are blank. Retarded, 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 retarded. Excellent point. Let's play the video.
True. The short answer is the carrot,
retarded.
The stick,
that's right,
and the treadmill, where the carrot represents the reward and the treadmill, the obstacle course set in front of them to obtain that reward. It is the developer's responsibility to not only create these obstacles, but also a rewarding method of overcoming them, and failing to do so, the player may be left with an experience that is overall frustrating and unrewarding. So this is speaking pretty theoretically. So today we're going to go over a couple of examples of this exact scenario, starting with the rank 14 system in vanilla World of Warcraft. So when the game was first released, it came with PvP enabled, but no reward for participation other than making strangers on the internet angry. But when patch 1.4 came out, this all changed, as it came with the honor system, which, put simply, worked as follows. By killing other players and completing battleground objectives, players would earn honor, and how much honor they earned compared to everyone else on their faction on their server, they would climb PvP ranks. There were 14 ranks in total, starting from 1, which was private for the Alliance and Scout for Horde, going all the way up to 14.
Imagine trying to rank in 2005 or 2006 when no one knows how the fuck the system works. The only reason the formulas, the bracket sizes of this ranking system are known is because people figured it out in the private server era, right? They've got the back end, the client side information, or like a server side shit. They figured out, okay, they're in the database. Okay, they got it. Back in the day, you were just blindlessly farming honor, hoping you got enough.
Which was Grand Marshal and High Warlord, and each rank gave various rewards, from gear, consumables, cosmetics, with the higher ranks of course giving higher quality rewards, climaxing with rank 14, which gave access to all of the weapons. So on a surface level, it seems like a pretty straightforward and fair system. The more you PvP, the faster you climb. But little do players know, it would become one of the most infamous grinds in MMORPG history. And one of the main reasons for that is because your competition are other players.
Also, if you ever take a break, you backstep. So it's for this reason, I actually think vanilla WoW ranking is the most degenerate gamer grind ever. It is more degenerate than farming every single 99 stat in RuneScape. Being rank 14 in vanilla WoW is more degenerate than having every single 99 stat in RuneScape. And the reason why in RuneScape, you could take a break. If you want to take a month off and go on vacation with your family, you come back and then you continue farming later on. Fine, do it. You can do that, and there's no punishment for it. If you take a break here, you're fucked. You have to keep going. No breaks.
amount of honor that you needed to farm was as much as how much the other players were willing to farm, which for most servers, since the rewards were so powerful, was however much you could farm by PvPing for more than 16 hours a day. There's a built-in decay in ranking for each weekly reset that the players would have to fight against, and this decay is percentage-based, meaning that the higher rank you climbed, the more you would have to PvP in order to make up for the increased decay. This would in turn also create a sunk cost fallacy, where if the player were to stop PvPing at any point, they would watch months and months of progress vanish before their very eyes. So naturally, because the competition was so fierce and there was so much at stake, cheating would become rampant. Many players would resort to account sharing to keep up a 24/7 farm. Opposing teams would collude with each other and intentionally try to queue up against one another through third-party voice programs such as TeamSpeak or Ventrilo, and then trade wins in order to get a leg up on the competition against the other teams on their server. It felt like you were competing more against your own faction than you were the enemy.
Pretty much you were. Yeah.
You essentially were. Collusion also took form.
Who remembers the pool parties? You guys remember the level 1 pool parties? You remember that? That was crazy.
In other ways, in an effort to reduce the amount of honor that everyone on the server had to farm, server communities would agree to farm to a certain amount, just enough to outpace uncooperative outside parties, and then stop, and taking a rotation of who could farm the most.
In fact, this is a memory that I totally forgot about. This is like, I don't know, fucking 3.5 or 4 years ago. I actually did this on stream. Some of you old frogs might remember this. There was a day where we crashed. It was a level 1 bot pool party outside Karazhan. It was vanilla WoW. Okay, classic vanilla. TBC was not out. And people were using like hundreds, thousands of level 1 bots to inflate the brackets at the Karazhan graveyard. Who remembers that? Maybe someone was here for that. And I went down there on stream and I sort of like I shined a light on it. Okay. Later that day, I got a DM on Discord from a burner account. This person, Karanos, that was different. This is in Karazhan. I got a DM from a guy, burner account. He sent me my address, my real life, first name, last name, the address at which I lived. And he said, if you keep hunting down bot like pool parties, we'll fucking kill you. I'm not even kidding. This is a fucking unhinged. If you keep talking about our botted pool parties, I'll fucking kill you. I got that message. Some of these people are fucking crazy.
And at what point? The amount of ranking points earned were determined by what bracket you were in.
Most sane ranker.
This was an invisible system not shown to the players, but people have figured it out over time. And the amount of space per bracket increased the more people on your server of your faction were PvPing. So for example here, these aren't real numbers, but for 1,000 active PvPers, maybe there were 2 slots in bracket 1, which awards the highest amount of ranking points possible. And if there were 2,000 active PvPers, maybe there were 4 slots instead. So because of this, players would make what are known as pool parties, where one player makes a low-level character near a graveyard, and another higher level of the opposite faction continuously kills that player as a spirit res over and over, and the rest of the PvP community makes level 1 characters to group up with until they get 25 honor kills, which is the minimum to be counted as an active PvPer for that week. Once they reach 25, they delete that level 1 character, make another one, and repeat over and over for hours and hours to artificially inflate the amount of active PvPers for that week, and therefore the amount of bracket slots, so more people could get more ranking points.
That's how they did it.
Participation in these pool parties is mandatory, as if you skipped out, you wouldn't be given high-level bracket slots and would be blacklisted by the PvP community. Infighting, drama, and sabotage would also be common. In the game, at this point, there were dishonorable kills. In order to prevent players from camping critical low-level questing NPCs, Blizzard made it such that killing these NPCs earned a dishonorable kill, which immediately decayed a player's rank. And if this happened at the higher ranks, weeks of progress could be lost in a single moment. And of course, since players were competing against each other more than they were the enemy faction.
Dude, you know it'd be kind of fun though. This is like insane, but it would be kind of fun. It would be fun. Okay, you have like an entire server of these like sweaty no-life rankers. They're trying to stack their brackets perfectly. It would be fun to be an absolute psychopath fucking degen, and you're like sitting there smoking meth, playing World of Warcraft for 57 hours straight, and just break brackets. It would be fun to be this psychopath meth smoking bracket breaker. And just every week, you're like unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. And you just break them every week. Fuck them, dude. And you're just like a psychopath. In a different life. That'd be crazy.
It would become a weapon of sabotage. Just one example here. In the 2019 line of Classic on the Fairlina server, there's a person who refused to abide by the community-run brackets, and they simply farmed as much honor as possible. And in retaliation, someone socially engineered this person for months, pretending to be their friend and gaining their trust, to invite them into a group in order to PvP with them. So this bracket breaker happened to be queuing up at the Alliance Warsong Gulch entrance in Ashenville, and he was in a battleground. So this fake friend got into a group to queue up with him for the next game. He gathered several civilians from the nearby low-level Horde questing hub, and as soon as the bracket breaker's battleground ended, and he loaded into Ashenvale, his so-called friend killed several civilians at once, immediately deranking them a few times over.
That's a war
This troll would prove to be quite effective, as the bracket breaker at that point simply quit entirely, as we...
There was another really fucking toxic thing you could do. This is in Classic 2019. They hotfixed this really fast. Do I have Atlas loot? Hold up. There it is. Do you guys know what I'm going to show you? I'll give you a hint. Strat Undead. Blizzard hotfixed this within 2 weeks of Phase 2 coming out. But for the first 2 weeks of Phase 2, let me go to Strat Undead. There was an item in this game. Where is it? Strathome Undead. And it dropped off of that fucking crazy-ass Baroness and Anastarzi. Where is it? Where's the item? Who drops the item that summons the Eye of Kilrog? This item. 3 charges it drops off of Naru Bakan and Strat Undead. For the first 2 weeks of Phase 2, summons an Eye of Kilrog and binds your vision to it. The eye moves quickly. So this is exactly the same as a Warlock Eye of Kilrog, but it's an item with 3 charges. Any class can use it. This eye was a civilian. This eye awarded a dishonorable kill. And so you had people griefing for the first 2 weeks of Phase 2. They were summoning Eye of Kilrogs and running into places where people were ranking. And this is when there's no BGs yet. People are doing open world ranking, like at the bottom of the Blackrock Mountain chain. And so anytime you saw... Also, okay, this summonable Eye of Kilrog was indistinguishable in every single way from a regular Warlock Eye of Kilrog. The regular Warlock Eye of Kilrog was not dishonorable kill, but this one was. And you couldn't tell the difference between the two. There's no fucking way to tell. And so I had a little bit of fun myself. I was a Warlock. I would just summon an Eye of Kilrog, and I would run it into a stack of Horde, and they would scatter like fucking cockroaches. It was actually so funny. Eye of Kilrog going in, and they're like, get away from the Eye of Kilrog. It was because everyone knew about the bug. It was fucking funny. I used to send that down the chain in Blackrock Mountain, and like all the Horde, because I'm trying to go down, and like they would all run away. It was actually hilarious.
Weeks of 12 hours a day grinding was lost in an instant. So despite the intensity of this grind, the armor and weapons that were offered were so powerful, both for PvP and PvE, many couldn't help but continue to grind. The lower barrier of entry into the more casual ranks, combined with the weekly decay, served as a very powerful sunken cost fallacy, and it took the player base captive and pushed them to grind more and more, lest all of the energy expended and sacrifices made thus far be for nothing. So naturally, what happened? You would burn people out, they would come to hate an activity they used to love, they would come to hate the players that they engaged in that activity with, and what seemed like such an innocent and simple system at this point had spiraled out of control into cheating, unhealthy playtime, burnout, social engineering, doxing, and
Imagine
yes, even death threats, as is standard with the classic PvP community. So it stands today as one of the prime examples of the developers creating a system that fails completely in protecting the players from themselves. For our next example, we enter the world of Star Wars Galaxies, released in 2003. This would be Star Wars' first dive into the MMO genre, which was followed.
People always talk about how great this MMO was. I never played it myself, but there's always one guy in the chat, oh, this was the best MMO ever.
By the Old Republic
it was
in
amazing.
2012. And in the game's initial version, which is known as the pre-combat upgrade, or pre-CU for short, the game had the profession system, which would total 32 by release, split up into 6 basic professions that you could pick at character creation. And
I'm gonna be a Jedi.
Which ones you specialized in,
be a
they led
Sith
to 26 advanced professions, they were called, which the players could mix and match in a pretty unrestricted way, such as a rifleman with healing skills, or a tailor who strips on the side. As for the professions themselves, they would be loosely separated into 3 major roles, which were combat, support, and crafting. Combat professions would range in complexity, the more straightforward being what you would expect from Star Wars, ranged classes using blaster.
Real quick, kind of related. You know one of the best games ever made? This game... The game is what, like, I don't know, the year is like 1999? Bro.
If you remember exploding Bantha compared to modern games with
this game, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, this was such a good fucking game back in the day. Oh my god damn. And it was on PC and console. One of my friends was like, I don't know, I'm like probably 9 or so years old. This is before WoW even existed. We were broke, but I had a friend of mine who had some money. They were a wealthier family, and his dad had, the year is like 2000 or like 1999 or some shit, I don't even know, 2001. And they had a room in their house that was a dedicated gamer cave. Like they had like 4 or 5 PCs. So they had money. Okay, it's probably 2001. They had 4 or 5 PCs, and we would go to their house, and not only did they have PCs for all the kids to play on, they had fucking joysticks. They had the hardware. They had the fucking setup. And so all of us are having Rogue Squadron LAN parties playing this game with joysticks, and we're doing this. This was so fucking fun. This was such a good game back in the day. God damn, that was a good game. Okay, anyway.
And melee with a variety of different weapon types. And as for the more complex, an example would be the creature handler, which was designed entirely around taming creatures found in the wild and having them fight for you. There were also bounty hunters, who had the unique ability to track down both NPC and player Jedi through the use of droids that would pinpoint their location no matter where they were hiding. As for the supportive professions, this would be healers like doctors who could buff and heal others. There were also dancers and musicians who would also buff people in cantinas. You had smugglers who could slice weapons, which would increase their damage, and they could also open locked containers.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a Jedi or a Sith Lord in this game.
Have a merchant who was more based around commerce, as they would gain the ability to create their own vendors to sell items to other players even while they were offline. Or perhaps a squad leader, which was designed entirely around buffing other players. And this would even extend to cosmetics, such as the image designer, who would be able to alter the appearance of another player. As for crafters, there were armor smiths and weaponsmiths who could make armor and weapons from monster parts. A tailor would make clothes, which were both cosmetic and functional. Droid engineers could make medical droids to boost doctor buffs, or those tracking droids for bounty hunters. And bioengineers played God and created creatures for the creature handlers to tame, and so on.
Oh my god.
The point is that the game had one of the most rich and diverse class systems ever made. But there was an issue, because there's one more that I haven't mentioned, and that's the most coveted of all. The Jedi, which the game would advertise quite heavily, but the only problem is nobody really knew how to unlock it yet. Of course, within the story of Star Wars, Jedi were rare and powerful, so making them in line with these other combat professions in order to maintain some semblance of balance didn't really make sense. So, in order to circumvent this, they had to make them extremely rare, and to make them extremely rare, they had to make them extremely grindy. It worked as follows. You had to master 5 professions, selected randomly per player, and you unlocked a Force-sensitive character slot, which allowed you to create the Jedi. Galaxies was a game with pretty sparse endgame content, so once players fully finished their templates, some would struggle to find things to do, so as a result, after having reached their maximum power level, most were pretty naturally guided towards this next level of advancement, the Jedi. So to find out which professions they needed to master, the players had to loot these extremely rare holocron items off of powerful enemies, which upon use would just directly tell them which one to master, but it would only work for the first 4, as
It only works for the first 4. Okay, so after you do 4, then you just have to master professions randomly, hoping you pick the one that makes sense.
as the 5th would be silent, only sharing a message that the ancients' knowledge of the Force will no longer assist them in their journey, and they must continue seeking it on their own. So, because of this, the optimal strategy then became to pray and master them all in an order ascending from easiest and cheapest to hardest and most expensive. And with 32 professions total, the chances of guessing the correct one early were very low.
Pretty fucking
MMOs, especially during these early years, shared some pretty common traits. They were all extremely grindy and time-consuming, whereas today the industry has shifted more towards activities that reset on daily and weekly timers to keep players busy. Back then, they instead relied on extremely long and tedious grinds in order to keep the players with something to do, and therefore subscribed. But this was a grind that would be so intense that it just chased people away, and people started quitting en masse. But for those who remained,
well, casuals don't get to be a Jedi. You can be a fucking
they would be
worker.
unable to resist the grind, as they would start dropping professions that they actually enjoyed and identified with, and just grind it out.
So if this game existed in the streamer age, could Asmongold just have people give him free holocrons? If you were Asmongold in this game, could you just be fun old holocrons? Yeah? Okay, easy.
Whatever the Magic 8 Ball told them to. It didn't matter how much they disliked the profession. Bounty hunters were now dancing in cantinas. Doctors had started to become politicians. And creature handlers were chopping up their pets to use as ingredients to make food. They cast aside their own enjoyment of what was supposed to be a fun journey in exchange for this hypnotizing Jedi, and they went through any means necessary, and it was for this reason, much like the Rank 14 system, that this Jedi system would be a failure, as the players had begun to sabotage their own experience and burn themselves out in the process. Once again, the developers failed to protect the players from themselves. The allure of the carrot far outpaced the reward of the treadmill. Although these are some pretty extreme examples, failing to follow through with this philosophy can be found in all corners of these games, particularly within daily and weekly activities.
So what do you think is better? Being able to grind everything super quickly, I mean, not super quickly. How can I put this? Would you rather have the only time gate for the content you're exposed to being how many hours you can play per day? Meaning, if you're someone that can play 20 hours a day, you're going to be infinitely more advanced than people that can only play 2 hours a day. Or would you rather have a game that has a more limited scope of daily or weekly quests, weekly or daily content, so everyone can kind of easily remain on the same pace? You prefer a grind. I think the correct answer is some middle ground between the two. I think there's some middle ground.
Activities. Although they're effective at giving players reasons to keep coming back, they can also do damage, as the reasons for these players coming back isn't necessarily because it's fun and rewarding, but more so rather it's punishing if they refuse to do them. If they're closely intertwined with the game's form of character progression, even if they're repetitive and unfun, the player base will still participate. Examples of this would be the Tower of Torghast in Shadowlands, which is generally looked back at with disdain, but regardless of that, the entirety of the player base participated in it many times because it was required to get the powerful legendary affixes. And also BFA is another period within the game's history where Blizzard was seen to over-rely on daily and weekly timers to the benefit of engagement metrics, but to the detriment of actual player experience.
I mean, yeah, it just, like, if there's too much daily or weekly content, it just feels like you're doing chores. Especially if the content is not fun. We all in real life have dailies. You ever have a job? You ever go to work? You guys have an 8-hour-long daily quest 5 days a week. It's called having a fucking job. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks dick. Feels like work.
Protecting players from themselves is a battle that's been raging on since the dawn of video games, and it continues today, most prolifically within the MMORPG genre, and it stands today as one of the biggest challenges that developers face. Like the video if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Good video. Thank you, Mad Season. I'm going to link that video here. It's a good video. Mad Season is back.